everyone, this is Grandmaster Damian Lemos here for iChess.net, and welcome to this opening series we are doing. This time we are going to talk about the King's Indian defense for black, and we know the King's Indian, it's being played by the best players in the world. You probably heard about it, and it is a dangerous and aggressive weapon we can use as black against d4. So for this introduction we'll analyze a game between Grandmasters Pickett against Garry Kasparov. We know Garry, he played the King's Indian a lot during his career. In fact, he won most of his World Championship matches playing the King's Indian. He also got to the top of his rating playing this opening, so it's fair to say the King's Indian is a nice tool to have. So d4, knight f6, knight f3. Of course white can also play c4, and then we play this move. This is the main move order. After knight c3 we can play d5, and that would be a Grunfeld. But if we play bishop here, e4 and d6, we have the main position of the King's Indian. So in this game, knight f6, white plays knight f3, we can still play this move, and usually we transpose c4, bishop there, knight c3, we castle. We can still play the Grunfeld if we want to. We have to play d5. Garry castles, e4, and then black plays d6. If white plays the other move order, the move order we just saw, he has other options as well. Instead of playing knight f3, he can play the Samish variation of the King's Indian with f3. This reminds us of the Sicilian a bit, because white, he can try castling queenside and doing a pawn storm on the king side. This is a well-known variation. Also, if he doesn't play with knight f3, he can also try the 4 pawns attack with f4, the Aberbach variation, playing bishop e2, and after this playing bishop here. We have a lot of variations for white against the King's Indian, but it is fair to say the main variation is what we'll see in this game, which is the classical line, also known as the Yugoslavian attack. So bishop e2, white usually develops the bishop this way. If he plays bishop d3, we know this bishop is a tall pawn crashing into the pawn chain, not to mention a move like bishop c4 is annoying for white, so he plays bishop e2 and e5. The main move by far. We have other options. We can play with knight a6, also knight bd7 supporting e5, but the thing is, we can play e5 immediately, and we are not afraid of white taking, because after this, queen takes d8, rook takes. It looks like white wins a pawn with knight takes e5, however we have knight takes e4, knight takes, bishop takes, and that position is close to equal. I have to say I prefer black because we have the d4 square, and white cannot control this square with pawns. He can only do that with pieces. On the other hand, if he tries jumping to d5, we can play c6, and we have d5 under control. So this slight difference gives us some advantage. And after knight takes e5, knight takes e4, if white is creative and plays this in-between move, we have bishop takes c3 check, pawn takes, king takes knight, and we have an extra piece. So we're just winning there. The exchange variation is playable, but I have to say white doesn't have much there. He's playing white, he has to play for a win, so castling looks better. Here we play knight c6. Once we play this move, we already have a threat. We have some tactics on the d4 square. As you can see, we have too many pieces pointing out the d4 square. I mean, if he plays a move like a3, which is nonsense, we can play e takes d4, knight takes, and then knight takes e4. No matter what white plays, he loses a pawn. If this, knight takes d4, and we have a clear advantage. And if he plays a knight takes c6, we play this. Knight takes d8, knight takes d1. If knight takes b7, we have knight takes b2. At the end of the day, we have an extra pawn, and even more, because if he goes knight a5, we have knight takes c4, winning a second pawn and this change on a1. So these are well-known variations, but this also helps us understand this well-known move order we see in a lot of games. Knight c6, d5, every single player plays d5 here, winning space and advancing in the center, knight e7, and white plays this weird looking move, knight e1. The point of this move is white is trying to stop knight h5. Now the center is closed. This is something that happens a lot in King's Indian. When the center is closed, black has the right to attack on the king side. And now a move like knight h5, trying to jump there, is interesting. Also, once we play knight h5, we can try playing f5. And as I said, we do all this because the center is already closed. We have our game, our goal on the king side. It looks like we'll push our pawns there. White, on the other hand, he'll try doing the same thing on the queen side, because he has the advantage there. So knight e1 is the first step. First, he stops knight h5, and also he prepares knight d3 followed by c5. So this knight e1 is a good strategy move. Black plays knight d7. Since we cannot play knight h5, we go to d7. You'll see some games where black moves his knight to e8, but playing knight d7 is even better, because we still prepare f5, and second, we are putting some extra protection against c5. I mean, white, he'll eventually play c5, but he'll have to prepare this move with more pieces. White plays bishop e3. This move reminds me a bit of knight e1. He's preparing his queenside attack, but he's also trying to guard his kingside. So f5. Here white plays f3, preparing this square for his bishop. It is worth pointing out that taking is not a good idea. We can take with the knight, and we have good options already. And most important, we can also take with the pawn, bringing a side pawn to the center, guarding key squares in the center as well. And who knows, maybe we can still advance with our pawns. White usually prefers keeping a pawn on e4, fighting for his center, and he plays f3. We advance, we win a tempi, and we prepare our pawn storm on the king side with g5. And this is probably the most popular position in the King's Indian. As we were saying, we'll fire on the king side. We already have good pawns there, and he'll try doing the same thing on the queen side. What I like about this is I'm attacking his king. If he attacks on the queen side, maybe he'll take my rook on a8, maybe he grabs some pawns on a7, c7. If we are both successful, I'm gonna win, because I'm attacking his king. He's attacking pieces on the queen side. So that's why I like this line for black. So after this, white plays b4, which is one of the moves he can play. The main move here is knight d3, trying to play c5, and this move is actually a bit better than b4. I mean, b4 is possible as well, he's preparing this advance, but after we analyze this game, we'll understand why knight d3 became more popular. We have other options. We have some gambits like rook c1. I played this myself against Reinaldo Vera. In that game, I remember I was 13, I played rook f6, which is a good plan in this variation, trying to do rook h6, queen e8, queen h5. Looks like a beginner plan, trying to mate white, but it works. And against rook f6, he played c5. This is a gambit. Of course, white is sacrificing a pawn, but he's more than happy to do so. I played knight takes c5, and after this, we reached a complicated position, but the trick here is, if black plays d takes c5, suddenly white wakes up in a couple of moves, and he gets a powerful attack on the queen side. If b6, he can play b4, and after this, he doesn't have to take on b4, he can play the stronger knight b5. And as we can see, despite being up 2 pawns, we are dead because we cannot protect c7 successfully. We can play c6, but after this, knight takes. We have this well-known trap. He's sacrificing this change, he's down a pawn, but his position is won already. Queen d5 is coming, rook a8 is hanging, my rook on c6 is hanging as well. So, yeah, black is toasted here. That's the word, I guess. So, this variation helps us understand what's going on in this variation. We have to focus on the king side. If we battle on the queen side too much, we are probably going to lose because we don't have many pieces there, we are lacking space. So, after b4, as you can see, Kasparov is not trying to stop c5 with moves like b6. That is actually helping white opening lines on the queen side. I mean, once he plays knight d3 and c5, his ruptures are now stronger because we already played b6. So we are not touching our queenside pawns yet. What we'll do is prepare the kingside attack with knight f6. c5. This is another key move. Most of you guys, you probably think about playing h5, which is a decent idea. Of course, we want to fire with g4, but this move order is more precise because we know he's trying to play something like rook c1 and knight b5, so just in case we can have rook f7 in, guarding c7. With the rook on f7 we can also try playing bishop f8, and with that variation, with that maneuver, we'll have our queen side under control. Also, imagine rook f7 and bishop f8, then the rook can go to g7 and we can still attack on the king side. These are well-known maneuvers that we can learn by analyzing a lot of games, but it is much better if you know them, if you understand them, because if this is the first time you see this position, it's tough to find the most precise move, the most accurate move. So white takes, we take with the pawn of course, queen takes c6, allows knight b5, winning a key tempi, also bishop c5 has to be considered. So we take with the pawn, rook c1, and rook f7. As we were saying, this is a well-known maneuver. We avoid knight b5, knight c7. Worst scenario, he takes the a7 pawn, but that's a bit slow, as we'll see. The thing is, we don't have to allow knight c7. That is stronger, because he attacks the rook on a8. We might even lose that rook if he manages to play knight c7, and he can also try a move like knight e6, which is quite annoying. Because bishop g7 is not our best bishop. It is crashing into the pawn chain, whereas bishop c8, it is a great bishop. We have to keep this bishop if we want to have a successful kingside attack. Imagine one day he plays something like h3. Well, this bishop is probably useful to sacrifice there, so it is key to keep that bishop c8. So rook f7 was our last move. Piquet played a4 and bishop f8. Nice waiting move by black. We overprotect this pawn, we still guard c7. We prepare rook g7 and g4. White plays a5. Bishop d7. Another nice, useful move by Garry. And once we have all our pieces developed, we are ready to fire with h5 and g4. So here white makes the mistake of playing knight b5, which is tempting. I mean, if I had this position as white, and if I didn't know any theory, I would also play knight b5, to be honest. Attacking the a7 pawn, trying to play knight c7. It looks tempting. The thing is, when he has the knight on c3, he's protecting the e4 pawn. That means if we want to play g4, we need to play h5 first. But when he plays knight b5, then e4 is not protected anymore. That means we can play g4 without preparing with h5. Now if he takes, I take the e4 pawn. That is why Garry played bishop d7. This is a good waiting move. We wait till he moves his knight on c3, and that means we can play this move in one step. And this is what happened in the game. Knight b5 was the mistake, black advances with g4, and we already have an attack. You're probably asking, is a7 hanging? It is, but after knight takes a7, he's not creating any threats. Our bishop is no longer on c8, and this knight is being protected by bishop f2. That allows a move like this. He takes, I take, and then, he can move the bishop, like bishop b3, bishop b6. The problem is, his pieces are messing around, and one day I'll sacrifice, and I'll play something like queen h4, queen h2. I also have knight f4, knight h5. He's basically defenseless here. Another good variation would be knight takes a7. I can play this. Takes. Let's say he plays bishop e3 instead. Then I can play something like knight takes d5. And then queen h4, queen h2. There's nothing he can do to stop the mate. So this is another good variation. Instead of taking on a7, well, this loses to bishop takes b5, and then I take on a7. Even if I didn't have bishop takes b5, I consider I still have a great attack if I play this move. And then I try bringing my pieces to the king side, but of course I prefer taking the piece on b5. So okay, in this position white played knight c7, which is the most logical move. Now our rook on a8 is under attack. We have to be careful, because if we play it passive, then he'll probably have the advantage, because when he plays knight c7, he definitely has the initiative. We have to understand in chess that initiative is much more important than material. So we play this move. We are not slowing down, and we'll continue with our attack. You can also think about a move like bishop a4, and after queen takes, rook takes c7. But if we play this, we are playing a queenside plan, and this is where white is trying to play. Even after the trades, what really matters is he's reaching the queenside, he's opening the queenside pretty soon, and our kingside attack lost its power, especially because bishop c8 is gone. So instead of playing this, which also gives white the bishop pair, we have to play something else. We know this runs into knight e6, or even bishop takes a7, rook c8. Well, we can try playing this, but I would be concerned about a move like knight e6. That knight looks annoying, so as we were saying, we don't lose the initiative, we play this move. We'll see this move a lot in the classical line of the King's Indian. We sacrifice a pawn, but we get what we want. We open lines in front of his king. White took on a8, and we'll see this wasn't the best decision. His best chance was taking, and he has no other move because this bishop is lacking squares. Takes, we take, and then he has to take. If he goes somewhere else, something like this, we have knight takes d5, for instance. Maybe we have other knight moves, but this is my favorite one, because we attack the bishop on e3, we attack the knight on c7, and then we have queen h4. Believe it or not, he is defendless, even if he plays rook f2. I don't have to take the rook, I can just check, and I play queen h1 mate. So, as we were saying, instead of knight takes a8, he can take, bishop takes. Here we can play something like knight h5. As you can see, this is the King's Indian power. We sacrifice a pawn, but suddenly all our pieces are playing. We have also a move like bishop h6. In a flash, every single piece is playing, and white, despite having an extra pawn, he has to defend. I mean, white wishes we still had a pawn on f4. Now we can place a piece there. We can also use the she file. We can play queen there. I mean, the possibilities are endless. And for instance, in this position, the computer says playing this move. He doesn't even care about the rook on a8, because if he takes, we have this. The only move is this. We have knight h3, king somewhere, let's say king h1. And in this position, for instance, we are down a rook, but white is defendless. We have too many pieces on the king side. You can check this with a computer if you want, but the point is we have to understand what's going on and how our attack works. So, yeah, white has to take. That was his best practical chance. This knight takes a8 is too risky, because worst scenario, we can take on f2 with check, and then we can take the knight, and that gives us two pieces for the rook, which is already a good deal. But Kasparov played knight h5, which is even better. I mean, if we take, let's see what happens. Rook takes, queen takes a8. Maybe he plays something like bishop f1. Okay, we have two minor pieces. We probably have a clear advantage, but okay, white has some decent counterplay. And what's more important, our fireworks are gone. So let us say that is slightly worse for white. If we play knight h5, we are not taking his bishop, but we still have this painful pawn on c3. We can still try queen h4. We can bring more pieces. We are down a rook, but our attack is still there. So that bishop can't go anywhere. I mean, if he plays bishop takes a7, we play queen h4. The only move he has is h3, and then we sacrifice. Pawn takes, queen takes, and he's absolutely lost here. After rook f2, we can take bishop takes, rook here, and it's game over. In this variation, we understand how important it is to keep this bishop on c8. I mean, to keep our light squares bishop. So king h1, now Garry takes. because he was trying to play this, of course. We don't even care about knight a8. We can take that knight later. We take, rook takes, and here comes another bomb by Garry. Knight here. This is amazing stuff. We cannot have a pawn on c3, then we'll try getting a new one there. If he takes, then it's checkmate soon. We attack the rook. As you can see, and as you probably realized already, he is defenseless on dark squares, so he cannot take. He has to play king there, and now we take. We have two pieces for the rook, but most important, we have a big difference. We saw a similar position already. Now we have this powerful knight on c3, and if he takes, we can just take, and our queen happily goes back to the king side in 2 moves. Even if we don't mate him, we have a huge compensation on dark squares. Imagine bishop h6 and bishop e3, for instance. So he cannot afford taking. He plays bishop c4, and Garry plays an amazing move, a6. I mean, we have other ways of playing this, but a6 is great because first we stop a move like b5, just in case. But most important, we'll continue our attack with queen a7. With this slow move, little move, we bring our queen to the action, and we know he cannot take. I mean, if he does, we just take, and as we were discussing before, we still have this bishop h6, bishop e3, queen d8, queen h4. White cannot create any counterplay on the c-file, despite having an extra exchange. So we know he's not taking. He played queen d3, queen a7, and well, in this position there's not much white can do. Piquet played b5, Kasparov took, bishop takes, and here knight h1. This was Garry's trap after this variation. I mean, when he played queen a7, I have to say this b5 is a human move. Maybe he has to play something like queen d2, overprotecting this rook on f2. But even if he plays this, I play bishop e7, I can try bishop h4. He's in huge trouble. But b5 takes, bishop takes, knight h1, or I can take first, and knight h1 afterwards. He's absolutely losing. After king takes, I take on f2, and then I wake up with an extra piece. So after knight h1, Piquet resigns. Very nice game by Garry. I actually saw this game when I started playing chess when I was 10, 11, and maybe this was the reason why during my first years as a chess player I played the King's Indian a lot. This is not the only game we see Garry playing this line. During next videos we'll also study some of these Garry's games in the King's Indian. And this will also help us understand how the King's Indian works. So that's all for this video. I hope you found this useful. I hope you could learn something. And of course I want to see you guys in my next videos. Thank you.